Now, for political outlook and what to expect in 2022, we're joined by political analyst Sandile Swana. Sandile, good afternoon and thank you very much for your time. I must say an important political year for the ANC and its alliance partners, because we all understand they'll all be holding their elective conferences. But let's start with the January 8th statement. What do you expect to hear from the president? I mean, his campaign has begun in earnest, or it should at the very least, but this is all against the backdrop of a highly divided party that failed to attain 50% of the votes in the local government elections and a whole host of other issues. What do you honestly expect him to say to ANC members?
The message is unlikely to change. The message will be a message that perhaps the election results prove that his call for renewal of the African National Congress was legitimate, and that indeed the voting public is also demanding that renewal. There will also be a call that says the ANC has lost credibility in the field of service delivery. For instance, some of his own comrades in the African National Congress said that the reason why they were losing elections in the local government elections was because of the power failures. But ESCOM failures are old. It's an old matter, and it has only been in the hands of the ANC. It only signals the failure of the ANC. The other problem that Cyril Ramaphosa has got to find a way of talking about is the fact that all of us are equal before the law. The July insurrection, for instance, was an indication that within the ANC there is a very strong group that believes that certain people should not be prosecuted, should be left alone. And that speaks again to the issue of unity or disunity within the African National Congress, because they've never clarified the basis of unity. The basis of disunity is clear. It is the crimes that have been committed by the members of the ANC, who also do not want to be prosecuted, who want a president who allows people to get away with crimes they have actually committed.
All right. So if we just perhaps touch on that last one, when you talk of the disunity or what divides the African National Congress, it's the corruption. Those who were at the helm had their opportunity and were feeding. But then some have come, I know I've listened to Tony Ngeni before, saying really at the heart of the divisions are, in this instance, ideological differences, not necessarily just the corruption element, where if there are those that are corrupt, they must go through the legal process. They actually have no qualms with that, but that they differ within the ranks of the political party ideologically. What do you make of that?
At a very serious level and practical level, there is nobody, whether it's the DA, EFF, or anybody who's got right now a license to involve themselves in ideological differences. The storage systems are not working. Electrical systems are not working. Trains are not working. That does not require any ideology. So the base on which you can actually say, I have a country, I can debate about the future of the country, is not there. The bottom has fallen out. So the time we're in now, we need somebody who can get the schools working, who can get the hospitals. That's the debate. That's where the debate needs to be. Mm-hmm. And that is what the DA and its friends are winning. In the ANC, when Tony Ngeni says there are differences about white monopoly capital, because that's what they end up talking about, at the end of the day, that becomes a smoke screen, truly a smoke screen for a simple demand that ANC members should be permitted to become rich by stealing money and not being prosecuted. There is no ideological debate in the African National Congress about nothing. They've got nothing to differ about.
Okay. And then in terms of their resolutions, because this one they vehemently state that, in fact, this is not a debate. They are on paper, and there's just slow pace in implementing some of those resolutions. In that respect, do they have a valid point or not?
There are some valid points, but the question is the urgency and importance of those points. On the land question, for instance, expropriation of land without compensation, those types of resolutions. The failure of the ANC to make sure that the native population, the black people of South Africa especially, get land, especially commercial farmland and land for commercial and industrial development, rather than just RDP houses. That issue is in the hands of the ANC and is well within the constitution to have progressed. Instead of doing that, they've focused on corruption, focused on bankrupting the land bank and other institutions that are supposed to make progress with that issue of land. Mm-hmm. There are others, such as nationalization of the Reserve Bank and so on and so forth, which are not urgent at all, because you can achieve those results without actually nationalizing the Reserve Bank, etc., etc. So the issues of the day-to-day quality of life of South Africans are the issues that the ANC should be busy with, rather than the pseudo-ideological debates.
Mm-hmm. Then to the more interesting one, Sandile, we have an upcoming elective conference that we're all building up to. But the interesting part is that there is no particular individual that is said or has been announced to be contesting against the current President Cyril Ramaphosa. So it's quite interesting. I know there's Willem Kize have emerged following what happened with eThekwini, where he was said he was among those that negotiated, and perhaps he's building up to the moment when he is revealed as a candidate as well. But at this point, from where you and I are standing, it doesn't seem like there are any candidates, because this time in 2017, there was a proliferation of candidates. We already knew there were slates flying around, but interestingly enough, this time around, it doesn't seem that there are people that have publicly come out to say they will be contesting.
Well, there's at least one perennial candidate, if you like, such as Lindiwe Sisulu. Sisulu, I think, remains a potential candidate, number one. Number two, I think David Mabuza, from his perspective at least, would still like to collect, because when he supported Cyril, there is a tradition in the African National Congress that once you become deputy president, you are automatically well placed, in fact, to become the next president and so on. I don't think they are short of ambitious people in the ANC. However, I think the political climate is so hostile that you don't want to make yourself a target too early, because when you emerge as a candidate, then people will train their guns on you.
Mm-hmm. No, and then to the alliance partners, though, COSATU and the SACP will also be holding their elective conference. Now, initial reports are saying that Zingisa might be re-elected, but Blade, of course, is then stepping down. This would be his final term, and some are calling for Solima Paila to take over. We all know that for the longest time, those at the helm of COSATU and SACP gave somewhat of an indication of the leadership that would emerge in the ANC, because they would start to, in their rhetoric, show their support for a specific candidate. But do we still have alliance partners that are that influential? Because for the longest time now, we're hearing them call of a reconfiguration of the alliance where they feel they have very little influence.
I think COSATU, for instance, its influence might have reduced, but more importantly, the left, which is the SACP and COSATU, have received cabinet posts. Patel and others, and Blade himself, have been in the cabinet, but they've got very little to show for it. The only thing that I've picked up is that, at least as in the recent period of Blade taking office, is that at least financially the SACP is strong. But what is more important is that both the SACP and COSATU are in an ideological and intellectual desert right now. So the ANC is in a deep moral crisis, deep strategic crisis, and ideas that used to help the ANC coming from the left are not there anymore, because they are themselves lost in the intellectual wilderness. So whatever they say, no matter which candidate they support, since the days of Jacob Zuma, they have never been able to come up with a candidate that is worthwhile. We don't know, as you correctly pointed out, for now they've not indicated which way they'll go, whether they'll support Sisulu, whether they'll support David Mabuza, were not yet clear. But anything they've brought to the table since the Polokwane conference has not been helpful at all.
And then the provinces, though, their influence, because we're expecting them to also finalize their elective conferences by March at the very least, because we know the regional conferences are currently underway. I mean, for the longest time, when we tried to assess, even as we were building up to 2017, when we tried to assess what was taking place in the provinces, we got somewhat of an indication of who would emerge victorious at the National Elective Conference. But this time around, we no longer have a Premier League. I don't know if you guys are battling as political analysts yourself to say, where do you think things could be swayed?
At this stage, it's too early to call it, but there are some phenomena that you've got to observe. For instance, in the Eastern Cape, there is very strong competition, at least, against Oscar Mabuyane, who is the favorite candidate supporting Ramaphosa. He is being seriously challenged, and within a matter of weeks, we will see if he himself will survive in the Eastern Cape. Some of them, for instance, in KZN, those who would have supported Ramaphosa, and even in Limpopo, Polokwane, for instance, those who have emerged on the basis of being able to formulate a compromise with the RT forces. And in some places, the RT forces in Limpopo and KZN are winning outright. So the position of the slate, the Ramaphosa slate, is not as certain as we would have wanted it to be right now.
And then just on perhaps the KZN element, I don't know if you are familiar with the issues there, particularly with Sihle Zikalala possibly falling out of favor and not returning, because we hear that even in KZN, there could be something where we're seeing Mxolisi Kaunda possibly coming there to provincial, and then there's talks that there's possibly Zandile Gumede making a return to eThekwini, and then Zweli Mkhize then becomes the candidate that is pushed. Could this actually work? Because we're speaking about Zweli Mkhize right now that has this cloud over his head.
Yeah, the province of KZN, from those names that you are mentioning there are names that are going to be technically unworkable, in the sense that once people have got court cases that are actually lined up against them, you take a big risk by giving them a big position, because the cops will fetch them and remove them from that position. So that will happen. However, the RT forces in KZN are gaining momentum, and I think they are sufficiently strong to make up a very strong contest against people like Sihle Zikalala, who have been wishy-washy in supporting Jacob Zuma and the RT forces. So that's slate, if you want to call it that. That slate of Cyril Ramaphosa here in KZN is in a little bit of jeopardy at this point in time. And one of the things that will surprise you is that for a variety of reasons, there is support in the intellectual community of KZN for an idea that says leave Zuma alone. So the RT forces have got a lot of support, even from quarters that you wouldn't expect here in KZN.
No, very interesting conversation. No, Sandile, thank you very much for that analysis. That's political analyst Sandile Swana.